Welcome back to First Steps, where we're learning how to follow Jesus step by step and grow in our relationship with God. In this session, we're talking about living a life of worship. The word worship comes from an Old English word meaning worth, ship, and means ascribing worth or value to something. I got to thinking, how do we ascribe worth or value to something today? I think there's a few ways we do this. One is through our time, what we spend our time doing. Our attention, what we spend our time thinking about. Our money, what we spend our resources on. So what we invest our time, our attention, and our money on, we are declaring that that thing has great worth or is worthy. Sometimes though, I don't think we know the worth of what we got. There's a movie that I loved when I was a kid, The Sandlot. There's a boy named Smalls. He moves into a new town in the summer and makes friends with a group of guys playing baseball. Every time a home run is hit, the ball is lost in the backyard of a man with a huge dog. So they would just go and buy another ball and start over. This time though, Smalls said, "Oh, I got it, guys. I've got a ball at home." He went home and grabbed a ball from his stepdad's office and went back to play. Because Smalls brought the ball, he got to be the next up to bat. And to everyone's surprise, he smashes a home run over the fence. Another ball lost. Now, they're all cheering, but Smalls is crushed because it was his stepdad's ball. Now, what we soon find out that there's something more to this ball that he didn't know. On this ball was a signature, as he put it, some woman, Baby Ruth? And then they responded, "You mean Babe Ruth? The Sultan of SWAT, the King of Crash, the Colossus of Clout?" And then they all said, "The Great Bambino." You remember the line, right? Now for the rest of the movie, these boys spend all their time, their energy, their resources to get that ball back. The problem was, Smalls didn't understand the value or the worth of what he had, so he didn't treat it accordingly. There are so many of us today who we just don't understand the worth and the value of what we have in Jesus. We don't get it. So often we take life for granted. We don't recognize His provision, His blessing, His protection. We often ignore the Lord's goodness and treat His grace as common and everyday. Even at church, we approach moments of worship with indifference, as if it's unimportant or casual, that we could take it or leave it. My prayer is that we would begin to understand the incredible worth of what we have in Jesus. Look with me at the story that's recorded in the Gospel of Mark. Mark chapter 14. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, this is Jesus in Bethany, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. And she broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. "Why this waste?" they said. This jar of perfume was worth a year's wages. The disciples and the Pharisees and everyone around, they didn't understand the extravagance of her offering because they didn't fully understand the worth of the one she was offering it to. In Mark, she's known as just a woman. But this story is also recorded in the Gospel of Luke, where this same woman, is also known as a sinful woman with a reputation. I want you to read with me what Luke says in Luke 7, starting verse 36. It says, "When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. And as she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. And then she wiped them with her hair and kissed them and poured perfume on them. And when the Pharisees who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner." And Jesus answered him, "Simon, I have something to tell you." "Well, tell me, teacher," he said. "Two people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and another 50. Neither of them, though, had the money to pay him back. So he forgave the debts of both. Now, which one of them will love him more?" And Simon replied, "I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven." "You have judged correctly," Jesus said. And then he turned toward the woman, and said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I came into your house, and you did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman from the time I entered has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she's poured perfume on my feet. Therefore, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little." Again, did you catch what they said? They said, "Why this waste?" Again, because this woman, she understood the worth of Jesus. The woman's extravagant act of worship is in direct proportion to her understanding of the mercy of God in her life. She's been forgiven of all of her sin. And now, in the presence of her Savior Jesus, she's willing to give all she has to honor Him. It's not a waste to her, it's worship. Worship, it flows out of an understanding of the worth of knowing Jesus. One of my favorite passages on worship, Paul writes this in Romans 12, verse 1. He says, "Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship." Did you catch it? Worship starts with a correct view of God. Paul says, in view of God's mercy. In view of His mercy. There are two terms that you might be familiar with that both powerfully describe what God has done in our lives: mercy and grace. Now, mercy is not getting what we deserve. Punishment for our sin, separation from our Creator, from God who loves us. Not getting what we deserve, that's called mercy. Grace is getting something we don't deserve. It's like a gift that we receive that we don't earn. So grace in our life is the love and the forgiveness from God that we don't deserve. It's access and blessing and provision and protection from Him. All of that we get is grace, mercy and grace. This woman who encountered Jesus fully understood the mercy and the grace of God in her life. So, worship then is acknowledging God for who He is and for what He's done. So through worship, we sing, we praise, we proclaim God in worship. And when we do, we're declaring who He is to others and to God Himself. And we're thanking Him for what He's done in our life. Let's worship more fully today.